and welcome to this episode of ITAP Connect series, where we bring you insights, conversations with speakers, and an opportunity to interact with other participants. We are delighted to collaborate with Microsoft on this episode that looks at enterprise 5G and the implications and opportunities for manufacturing and adjacent industries and businesses in the region. Without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce Sean Hockel, Vice President for 5G Strategy at Microsoft USA, who will give us the big picture on 5G developments in his opening presentation.
My name is Sean Hockel, and I'm the VP of 5G Strategy in the Azure organization at Microsoft. In my openings, I'll share what gets the teams at Microsoft excited as we look at 5G, where we're seeing early traction in the marketplace, both globally and in Asia, and finally, what lessons have we learned from the early deployments and what do we take away from those lessons that can be helpful to you as you think through your journey to a 5G enterprise-based solution. So I'm sure you've heard all of the magical benefits of 5G and all the excitement that's created around that. We're very excited at Microsoft as well. Now, we have some signals from the market taken from data on our current platforms. We process 5 billion, trending towards 10 billion cognitive services transactions per month. And that's translating into more than 1 million machine learning experiments. So we can see where people are using the power of AI and ML to make a difference in business process. Similarly, we have signal from more than almost 6 billion IoT devices, and we understand the challenges of scaling up IoT in a large scale, as well as where people are experiencing success with their using the technology for both consumer, enterprise, and government use cases. We're sifting through that signal, and as a result of the data we're collecting there, we've gotten very excited about sort of 3 key elements of how 5G comes together with the services of a hyperscaler to really offer revolutionary change in the capabilities we can deliver to enterprises. The first of all is the power of combining 5G with edge compute, which results in ubiquitous compute. And that, of course, moves forward Microsoft's vision of becoming the world's computer, where you can get compute resources where you need it, when you need it. That leads into an exciting next possibility, which is the ability to bring together the power of data and AI with the real world, basically blending together the digital and the physical world in such that you can take action on things that are occurring when they're happening. So, for example, if you think in sort of today's narrowband IoT or Cat-M1 LTE devices, you can put a sensor on a package or on a vehicle. You can collect data, transport it back to the cloud, analyze it, and act on the predictive analytics next time something's going to happen. However, as you combine the power of AI and ML with compute in close proximity to the actual activity, with ability to respond in sub-millisecond timeframes or millisecond timeframes, it gives you a whole new range of capabilities. You have the ability to respond to activity that's happening. You can analyze a high-definition video camera feed, collapse down the vast volumes of data into very, very simple inferences that can be the process passed to an engine and then passed back to a device that can act quickly to affect work in the real world. So no longer are you looking at what to do next time, you're looking at what to do right now. And it's a very exciting future possibility for 5G. And then finally, we believe 5G is where the next form of content will be carried, right? There's a demographic change in the way that people consume content and where they consume content. Much more focused on the smartphone. The mass capabilities of eMBB, which comes with 5G, gives the power of more bandwidth to that handset device, and it'll change the way in which we play, in which the way we work, and the way we experience the world. So this is an opportunity for us to combine the capabilities of 5G plus our Teams product to bring that mobile native experience and alternate forms of content into that collaboration. It changes the way that you'll game. We bring together the power of our cloud gaming platform along with 5G to deliver new content and new forms of experience to players. And then finally, just in general, we believe that there's a whole range of mixed reality content that'll be created out of this. That ability to bring compute close to the edge to do the dynamic insertion of content will change the way in which people experience mixed reality, and make mixed reality, bring it to life, make it more reactive, and allow it to react to the environment in near real time in a way that's compatible with a pleasant user experience. So we're very excited about the possibilities at 5G at Microsoft and see some very specific areas based on the data signals that we have from the market where things are going to explode. Now I'd like to take you through the use cases as we see them evolving by industry. And I'd like to start with manufacturing. There's a lot of activity in manufacturing. Our early activity is really around digital twins, taking data from modeling from the back office, aligning it and overlaying it about what's occurring in the real world so that you can predict what will happen in different scenarios. That's expanded more recently to things like processing high definition video within facilities for things like worker safety and loss prevention. And then finally, we're seeing people bring the power of augmented reality into the workplace, where you can dynamically generate content to assist workers as they go through high value tasks. So really bringing together knowledge workers with the power of compute to act as a force multiplier. In another case, we see a lot of activity in agriculture. And you've seen we have a multi-year project around farm beats. This is where we take data-driven farming to increase yield, reduce input costs, and mitigate losses. But all of that's predicated on your ability to do low-cost data analysis. So we use a combination of data collection mechanisms with drones, sensors, and cameras, combined with machine learning to augment the farmer's understanding of their environment, to tap into their intuition, and give them a better opportunity to use a combination of science with their own knowledge to yield better results at a lower cost. Another area we see a lot of activity in is the energy sectors. In fact, we've partnered with our friends at Schneider Electric to capture condition-based maintenance data from artificial lift pumps. They feed to an edge device and they're combined with Azure machine learning to produce a predictive maintenance model. This lower latency means better safety. Our ability to do less dispatch means that fewer vehicles are traveling, which means workers are safety and the environmental impact is lessened. And overall, the efficiency of maintaining and managing those pumps is greater. And other areas that we're seeing a lot of activity is in mining, and more recently in some discussions about how vehicle to vehicle will work and vehicle to infrastructure. Now in mining, like many cases, this is an opportunity to place a private network in an area where you traditionally don't have good network coverage. You combine it with localized compute to run key applications locally, but still with the ability to backhaul, for example, via satellite or via terrestrial facilities back to the cloud so that you have some access to the outside world as well. It provides an environment which is conducive to worker happiness. They can use their standard telephony equipment to stay connected with the outside world, and it gives you the ability to capitalize on high-value asset tracking, condition-based maintenance, automated guided vehicles, and other opportunities like that. We're seeing the same thing happen on oil rigs. So this is really an opportunity to take the power of private networking and edge computing to areas where it wouldn't traditionally be applicable, but have a lot of high-value operational activity that you can really drive a solid business case around. Now, from a regional perspective, we're seeing most of the activity in the APAC region, in the Asia region, really around agriculture, the energy sector, and in mining. So a lot of leading edge work being done there. I would suggest, in fact, that in a lot of ways, Asia is leading the world in these areas, and there's a strong business case for the implementation of that technology. They're also working. Manufacturing is also another area we see a lot of activity there. Pre some of the current circumstances, retail was very active as well. I have no doubt that for every use case that I can come up with, there's somewhere out there someone's contemplating 3 or more interesting cases, and we'll see a lot of activity in this area. But at a macro level, that's where we're seeing the vast majority of the use cases today. I'd like to wrap up by taking you through the lessons learned we've taken away from the many proof of concepts, pilots, and actual deployments that we've done across the globe. So I'd like to share the first thing is, really, you shouldn't be deploying technology for technology's sake. And not that that needs to be said, but I'll say it anyways. If the solution can be done with Wi-Fi or LTE or LoRa, awesome. Those combined with edge technology are providing a lot of value today. However, 5G and edge compute has a number of unique capabilities I think that you should consider as you're thinking through which use cases. The first one that's most widely talked about is low latency. And really, you should be thinking in terms of latency envelopes. So with low latency, if you get below a millisecond, you're talking in the realm of industrial control. So that's the case where you can use 5G sensor data collection along with an actuator that responds fast enough to mimic a remote PLC, or a remote programmable logic controller. And that's the realm you need to do things like driving safety for industrial equipment, controlling industrial equipment. And what that really does is it allows the manufacturers to move stuff around on the factory floor, rapidly reconfiguring the factory without sort of the cost of recabling everything. It becomes extremely attractive and a fast turnaround. Similarly, it allows you to implement sort of more intelligent safety-based controls and loss prevention controls. And that leads me into the second advantage, which is really the ability of 5G combined with edge compute to localize data and bringing compute and storage proximity together, which essentially allows you to do things like capture live video, compress it down. There's usually typically about 1,000-to-1 compression ratio from data collected to the time you turn it into data that can be fed to an inference engine. And that lets you collect more data from more feeds, which guarantees more accuracy, but then also process it locally and respond quickly to anything that you see. Obviously, if you're doing a worker safety analysis video, it doesn't do you any good to report out an unsafe condition 2 days later. You'd obviously like to know that data as fast as possible. Similarly, that allows you to do dynamic content insertion for things like AR and VR that's meaningful and real. In other words, you can process the data by understanding what the viewer is seeing and give meaningful visual cues back in near real time. And then finally, and that usually takes about a 7 to 10 millisecond latency window. So if you sort of fit within those two today, those are the key ones that we're seeing to have meaningful impact in applications. That's really where we see 5G making a difference. And then finally, another big area that's super important is just addressing data security, privacy, and compliance. Having localized compute and storage tied to a secure network where you've got sort of guarantees over where the data is processed and how it's processed, and you can embed the capabilities of zero trust networking directly into the network using the SDN capabilities of 5G. You've got ways to guarantee the security and compliance of data, whether it's video data you're capturing, whether it's the ability to put in industrial data overlaid on a worker's headset or handset to really control how that's distributed, so that you have the same level of control and compliance checking that you do over data that's distributed by more traditional corporate networks. So we're seeing a lot of energy in that space. The next thing, the next lessons learned that I would offer is for these to truly hit scale, for us to truly take advantage of what 5G offers, particularly around industrial IoT, with a lot of the mixed reality and other capabilities. We need to understand and exercise the ability of 5G plus edge compute to offer fully automated experience. So zero-touch provisioning, self-optimizing networks, self-healing experiences. We really want to provide an experience for the end user that is simple, that's super secure and very resilient. And leveraging the power of that of automation, leveraging the power of zero trust security helps make that happen and should be factored into the way that you design your initial deployments. And then finally, what I would suggest, as you're working through the opportunities for 5G, you extend out past your traditional IT and back office. In other words, IT has traditionally done very well at automating back office processes, helping for things in the headquarters. To really find the advantages for 5G, which is able to deal with things that are outdoor and moving, not just indoor and still, you have to get out and talk to the VP of operations, your COO, the head of distribution, logistics, et cetera. That's where these use cases are coming out of. And you need a deep understanding of the business process and a good partnership with your business to really touch on the core business. This is the value, the power to bring AI and ML into the real world. The ability to collect data from physical objects and offer that same capability is where the real excitement is. And so as you're doing that, I think that, look for the use cases there. There's not going to be very many migrations. If it's working on 4G today, if it's working on Wi-Fi, if it's working in the cloud, you're not going to suddenly move it to the edge. You're not going to, the jump to 5G isn't going to be there. It's the new use cases where the excitement's going to come. So really, as you think through this forward, a few things just to close out with, really, this is an evolution of technology over time. You can start out by thinking big, but acting locally. In other words, the initial deployments of 5G will really capitalize on private networking. You can implement it locally. You can take advantage of the spectrum that you have. You're not waiting on a full-scale deployment. So places like venues, factories, airports, places where you can create unique 5G experiences, also very exciting. And then I think fundamentally people need to look at this as a business-driven revolution. Although the technology itself, as I mentioned, is revolutionary, and you should expect it to evolve over time in such a way that it will drive down cost, make things easier to implement, and the opportunity or the capabilities of the technology as you look at the different release schedules with 3GPP grow quite a bit over time and get quite exciting. But what doesn't get exciting is not having a business case from day one. You should have a clear view of the business benefits you're going to drive, and then work carefully with the operator, the application provider, the cloud provider to get the technology to perform the way you need it to fulfill the business case. And once we get that combination of understanding, deep understanding of the business, because that's where the changes that will be made will be truly revolutionary, will help guide the way that the technology evolves, and together we'll create an awesome outcome for your business. So with that said, I thank you very much. I'm looking forward to hearing what the panelists have to say. We've got a great collection of experts today to answer all your questions on how 5G is being used to support the enterprise, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thanks, Sean, for the presentation and for providing context for our following discussion. Before we transition to the panel session, we'd like to run a quick audience poll to get a better sense of who the audience here is with us today. Right, there's just 4 quick questions. What are your objectives for joining us today? What are your concerns in adopting Industry 4.0? And more specifically now, in relation to the topic today, what are the use cases you will rate as priority for 5G in manufacturing? And also, how open is your organization to implementing? Okay, so these very quick, simple questions. Your responses actually be useful for audience, for speakers to have a better idea of where your organization is in terms of overall deployment concerns and things like that, and so that they can also contextualize any examples that they bring up in the course of discussion later. All right, so I'm not kidding when I say it's very quick. I'm going to do a quick countdown from 5, and then we'll flash the results on screen. Okay, everyone? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, right. Let's see the results. Okay, wow. Okay, maybe speakers will take note as well. Lots of people just here to learn more, and a quick even split between concerns of cost and cybersecurity. Interesting. Ganesh might want to take note. And then use cases that be considered as priority, be edge computing and analytics, followed by AR. Okay. And then how open is your organization? Well, that's quite a mixed bag there. Okay, so I hope this is useful for our speakers to take note of in the course of discussion. All right. So without further ado, let's bring on our panel speakers for today. They are Mr. Ganesh Narayanan, ASEAN Lead for 5G Telco and FV SDN Security at Accenture Security. We also have Mr. Anthony Loy, Smart Factory Program Lead at Schneider Electric, followed by Mark Yong, Managing Director for Asia Pacific at Bloom Global based in Hong Kong. Stephen Carter, Digital Manufacturing Integration Systems Technical Specialist for Smart Factories, Cyber Physical Systems at Rolls-Royce based in the UK. And Mr. Saj Kumar, Regional Business Lead for Manufacturing at Microsoft Asia. Our moderator today is Dr. Olivier Rival, Partner at at Boston Consulting Group here in Singapore. We have a great lineup of speakers who have a lot to say in the topic, so please feel free to interact and post your questions for them using the Q&A function. Questions will be tackled as they occur where they relate to the discussion. All right, so with that, let's get into the discussion as I hand things over to Olivier.
Thank you very much, Jane, and good afternoon, everyone. We're indeed very lucky to have a panel of speakers that are really at the forefront of 5G adoption in the enterprise space, and coming both from the end user perspective as well as from the supplier. So on the end user perspective, we have companies like Schneider, Rolls-Royce, Bloom Global, and from the supplier side, Microsoft and Accenture. Let's maybe start from the end user perspective. And in his remarks, Sean was talking about the zoo of use cases that 5G enables in the enterprise space, from everything from augmented reality, virtual reality on the shop floor, massive machine-to-machine communication, autonomous vehicles. So a very broad range of use cases, but he was also highlighting the need to start with a clear business case. So I would love to hear from our panelists here, from your experience so far, what are the use cases where you see the most value in your context? And maybe also give a sense to the audience of what do you see the maturity of those use cases to be? Are we still mostly at the POC stage, proof of concepts, or is it really already something that you are rolling out at scale, scaling up? Let's maybe start with you, Anthony. Schneider has been very active in this space, and Sean was mentioning some of the collaboration that you've been doing with Microsoft. So from your point of view, what are some of the highest value use cases that you've seen so far where 5G plays a critical role?
Yes, thanks, Olivier, for your question. From our experience, so we have today pilots on 5G in 4 different geographies. And the starting point for us was really pragmatic, meaning we have an Industry 4.0 program that we started 4 years ago. And we just reopened the book on, let's say, the actions, the projects that were not rolled out because we were not, let's say, capable to deploy these use cases depending on the location or technical constraints. So what we decided to do was to partner with, let's say, local telco or technology providers and to come back on these projects. So we have basically an agile production line that we are able to reconfigure depending on the product mix that we have. We have also a project on automated guided vehicles. And so we didn't reinvent anything in terms of technology, but we decided with them to review the way to deploy this use case to make 5G an enabler and really an extension of our Industry 4.0 program. Now, around your question about maturity, if I look internally where we are, I see 3 angles to answer to this question. There is, first of all, an evaluation of our maturity geography by geography. So we pilot 5G in Indonesia, China, Europe, and US. And obviously, the local context is different. So the maturity will be different depending on how we have started the partnership with, for instance, local telco or technology provider. There is the maturity of the use case. So some solutions are already ahead. We have, for instance, partners on automated guided vehicles who have already started to develop on their own some solutions. And then finally, there is the maturity of the group. The idea is when we do something like that is to be able to duplicate it across multiple sites. And probably here we are still learning from the different use cases that we have. But obviously, yes, we started on a very pragmatic way in the continuity of what we've done for Industry 4.0, not trying to reinvent too many things, but really to have a real proof of value of 5G and what 5G could bring to us immediately.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Maybe continuing around use cases for Industry 4.0. I think this is a question that was the first question that popped up from our attendees as well. And maybe, Stephen, this is something that you can comment on. What are the key use cases that you've seen in Industry 4.0 or smart factories where 5G really has played a differentiating role?
Well, certainly from a Rolls-Royce perspective, we're exploring the kind of the business cases at the moment and with our technology providers and where and when that could happen as such. But I mean, it's certainly, geographically, Anthony mentioned there is a difference in terms of the rollout across the world. Certainly in the UK, there's a government entity called UK 5G, which has been sponsoring some lighthouse projects with some other industrialists in various different types of applications, sort of general peripheral sensors and technologies through to kind of AGVs or even high frequency data. And I think also there's a difference between kind of using public infrastructure 5G and also using private 5G. So many larger corporations may go down the private 5G infrastructure in terms of the coverage of the factory for performance levels they required based on the current bandwidths that are available through the rollout through the world, because they do vary, as Anthony has alluded to. So some people may go down more the private route in the initial years, and obviously the network slicing is still in its maturity in certain aspects around the world as well in terms of what's been rolled out, and some people might want to go for more private 5G to be more control of the performance and also through security as well, particularly if you're in a regulated sector where you have got sovereignty on the data as well, as opposed to using public infrastructure, for instance. So that might have a play for different organizations depending on their business model, the business sector that they operate in, and also the applications in question.
All right, thank you very much, Stephen. So Anthony and Stephen, you're both coming from the manufacturing angle. Maybe just expanding a little bit beyond that, Mark, you have been looking at 5G use cases and adoption of 5G in a slightly different context, which is how do we use 5G in the supply chain context, and in particular in Hong Kong and China. Would love to hear from you again. What is your view on what have been the high value use cases so far, and how are you thinking about adoption?
Okay, thank you, Olivier. So if I may ask all the audiences to shut your eyes and pretend you are shipping a container worth of high value goods from a factory, from a source all the way to destination. Okay, I'm going to use a buzzword, first mile, last mile. Okay, from the warehouse, we talked about AR. That's where 5G is being applied to. Then you have, they're testing the driverless trucks to take the goods to the port or terminal. But of course, near distance, not long distance at this stage, yeah? Within the terminal itself, there's lots of, I think, was it Anthony or Stephen, you talked about the private security network. That's where 5G has been applied to various port entities, actually. And since SingX is sponsoring this as well, and Jane has, so I've got to say hats off to Singapore in Asia for leading the charge of 5G at Tuas Terminal, the new port, mega port that's coming on stream soon, as well as various ports in China. They're very far in advance in deploying 5G. And you can think about when you're loading a container onto a ship, normally for a large ship, like a 12,000 container ship, I'm just simplifying things, it normally takes 4 days. You know, you can reduce down to 2 days. So you look at the implication for that, for a mega ship, that how fast you can actually load a container ship. In terms of geography spread, I talk about Asia Pacific, and I think Hannover Messe also is part of this institution. So I got to say, Port of Hamburg in Europe has been quite instrumental in deploying 5G, as well as Rotterdam. But in the Asia context, you have China. In China, Yangshan, Qingdao, and Xiamen. Those are the big, fairly big ports. China also has taken into account the smaller ports as well. You have Guangzhou in South China and Wuhan as well, which is famous for other reasons. But they're also actually exploiting 5G technology to accelerate the productivity. And somebody mentioned the AGVs earlier on, right? Was it you, Anthony? You talked about the automated guided vehicles. In Singapore and Rotterdam, they're all deploying that in various ports in China as well. So let's say the container has been successfully loaded onto a ship. Now, some shipping lines, some container manufacturers, they already proven the concept of 5G at the container level, where you can actually specifically locate, linking via satellite, the temperature, location, humidity, and the movement via the G-forces. Yeah, as it moves, you can actually see the G-forces. And this 5G applies on rail as well, intermodal. However, for those actually manufacturers attending this session here, hasn't been quite ready in the aircraft industry yet for anything in flight, as far as I know. Unless Stephen, I think Rolls-Royce, you can comment on that. You're very much into the airline sector, aircraft sector. So when it gets to destination, the same thing applies for the loading, except for the reverse. Now, let me tell you about, I talked about the number of days it takes to load a container ship has been reduced by basically by half. But in terms of one crane, instead of having thousands of wires moving around, you actually reduce the lift. You can actually reduce the time to lift a container or take a container from a container ship down onto an AGV to take it to outside to a truck. So one container crane can actually increase the load from 30 lifts to 50 lifts. So in summary, really, you can look at the reduction of cost around about 70%, and it is efficiency up 30%. And this is, I'm talking about big containers. Now, in terms of small parcels, 1 kg parcels, in China, you have the China, the Alibaba. There's actually Yongqi Cloud Town. Actually, it's going to be it's basically set up a few years ago, first digital town. And they aim to actually deliver 1 kg parcels within whole of China, maximum 24 hours. Okay, so I'll stop there. So that's the kind of last mile. This is how 5G has been proven, tested, and actually rolled out in real life supply chain scenarios. Yeah, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mark. And those are some very impressive figures. I think you were mentioning like efficiency gains of like anywhere between 30% and 70%. This is, and again, cutting down cycle time by half. All of that is very impressive. And I'm sure many of our attendees are thinking now, how can I get some version of that in my context? Maybe just to round up our little tour of different industry sectors. Saj, you're coming from the supplier angle, but you're also engaging manufacturers across the regions and mining companies across the region. Maybe would be good to hear from you as well. Let's say in the mining sector, any exciting use cases that you've seen, or how 5G is really penetrating this sector, and again, what is the value that is being gotten out of that?
Thanks, Olivier. So if you look at mining across Asia, we know that they're all in fairly remote locations, and connectivity was always a challenge in many of the mines across Asia, particularly Indonesia, parts of Australia. So they were always kind of rigged up operations to get data from assets and try to improve or optimize mining operations. I think number one concern for all mining operations is safety, and safety can definitely be driven through automating operations where you try to take the human away from dangerous locations. And the only way to automate operations is to have connectivity within the mines, whether it's an open pit or underground mine. So I think that's number one. Number two is, I think if you look at open pit mining, the key to optimizing operations is the haulage of the ore from the mine to the different locations. And that heavily depends on the big haulage assets that have to move around. So connecting the moving assets to a network to understand where they are, how much are they transporting, and also to pick up signals from them in terms of maintenance activities that need to be done on the truck. Because every time the truck goes down, you're actually dropping production in the mine. I think that's the other use case that I would look at. So essentially, it's three things. One is safety. Second is the haulage operations, and the third one is maintenance, preventive maintenance.
Thank you very much, Saj. Right, so I think we covered some of the use cases. Again, impossible to cover all of them in a short amount of time, but great to have this overview of where the value is and how different industry sectors are thinking about it. Let's maybe now turn our attention to the how. How do you go after this value? And we've been very focused on 5G, but I think a key point that Sean was making in his introductory speech is that 5G is just one piece of the puzzle. It's an important piece, but it's just one piece of the puzzle. Many of those use cases require very high standard connectivity that 5G enables, but also edge compute, analytics, specific applications and platforms. And those use cases are also touching extremely sensitive data. This is some of the most sensitive data that manufacturers may be handling, and the cost of getting it wrong or having any loss of production climbs up very rapidly. So in that context, security and resiliency are top of mind questions for many of the companies that embark into Industry 4.0 programs, whether through 5G or others. Ganesh, you've been looking at those questions of security and resiliency, especially as it pertains to 5G. And I would love to get your thoughts on how should companies think about security as they go into implementing Industry 4.0 use cases.
Thanks, Olivier. I've been in the security industry for the last 15 years, and I've always seen that security has been an afterthought, always. The very good way to do anything is to embed security into your design and architecture. So as you develop your business case, as you develop your use cases, your application for that specific 5G use in a private network for manufacturing or connected industries is to weave in security as part of your architecture, right? So there are two reasons for that. Number one, security by design is always the most resilient. I mean, whatever that you do after you deploy your network, if you put perimeter security, that's fine. But then the native security that you build into your architecture is the best. So my recommendation to all in the manufacturing sector is to weave in security as part of your architecture and design. Number two, it's very difficult to get budget approvals after you have deployed something. So having been working with a lot of CISOs and CXOs, I figured out that getting a security budget is not easy after you have deployed something. So some of the big challenges in security specific to private 5G networks and that too in manufacturing are multifold. We should accept that 5G as a technology is more secure than its predecessors like 3G and 4G, but that's more on the protocol level. But then the implementation that happens in an industrial environment, in a manufacturing environment is very different. So you could use 5G as an FWA, a fixed wireless access. If that's only for connectivity, then it's fine. But if you're going to use the other benefits of 5G that we just talked about, Mr. Heckel just talked about. So if you're going to use it for industrial control, if you're going to use it for operational technology, real-time control and visibility, if you're going to use it for predictive analytics, if you're going to use it for network connectivity, for the ease of moving things around for the mobility's sake, then you need to plan your security, network security and network segmentation. You need to take care of your edge computing. Your multi-access edge is a point of attack for any attacker. You're going to store, you're going to compute, you're going to be doing a lot more activities at the edge. So your edge computing or your multi-access edge becomes a point of threat attack. And apart from that, one of the greatest learnings that we've got from some of the trials that have happened here is that when you develop a use case, for example, I think Mark talked about the logistics and supply chain, right? So when you look at so do you have the end-to-end visibility of your operations? When you operate with 5G technology, do you have the end-to-end visibility of security? So the end-to-end visibility of security is an enabler. It is not just for your maintenance. It's an enabler for selling your product to market faster, because that gives you the resilience that your operation is going to withstand a security attack that could come later. So I would say the impact of security being an enabler for 5G in industry is much higher than before with the advent of IoT, with the advent of edge computing, with the advent of cloud, and with the advent of network slicing.
Thanks a lot, Ganesh. Maybe just to hear from people that are on the other side, end users, Anthony, Stephen, Mark, how is the discussion going internally within your companies as you are thinking through the how to make those use cases secure, how to manage potential reluctance of different stakeholders in your companies? Is that broadly what Ganesh has been describing, or any other practical learnings, recommendation that you would have for some of our attendees that may be thinking through those questions right now?
Yeah, if I may.
Okay, carry on.
Maybe Anthony first and then Mark.
Okay, rapidly. So what you just mentioned, Ganesh, completely resonate. We had, over the last 3-4 years, a very strong cybersecurity program that we continue to roll out. We are manufacturing products which are more and more connected with the firmware embedded and so on. So we had segregation, firewall, segmentation, and also a control on our network to make sure that we are protecting our asset and our product. Now, what you just raised completely makes sense for us to upfront consider. I was speaking, for instance, about machine-to-machine communication and agile production line. So if you manufacture a connected product on an agile production line powered by a private network, how do you have to reconsider your cybersecurity strategy on the shop floor? And so the way we work, as I told you, we have use cases in different geographies. We work with 2 feet. So we have 1 foot on the accelerator because we want to learn. So this is why we authorize experimentation. But we have a team also who is there also to put 1 foot on the brake where we need. And I can tell you that currently, for instance, in Batam, this is what is happening. So we are learning. but we are also slowing down a week or two to make sure that the central team that we have, which is learning from all the different use cases, is able to adapt our cybersecurity framework, taking into account 5G. And then what we will learn in Batam will be then reapplied to the other location, keeping one unique framework on the way we deploy 5G, even if locally we have probably different partners and different practice. But what you just mentioned completely resonate, and especially the more your product is becoming sensitive, the more your line is being connected. That's a topic where you need to take it into account upfront. And in our culture also, we decouple security from the project. Security is mandatory, so it's not something that you can negotiate in the project. So we have usually decoupled the security upfront, make it mandatory, and then you deploy your project.
Mark, I think you had a few comments as well. You wanted to react.
Yeah, thanks. It's a very good point, and Ganesh, thank you as well. So we as Bloom, we are a SaaS-based cloud platform. So all our stakeholders, be it our partners or clients, they subscribe to the fact that security is an issue, and so we take that ownership to make sure that we take care there's no breach of security. So that's our brand per se. So any partners we deal with on behalf of our clients must ensure tight security, no leakages. So that's one thing. And as a whole, I use that buzzword ecosystem. Really, the whole ecosystem is really we put security as a so it's not really an issue. I think the hardest thing is to get the old traditional companies, supply chain, logistics companies to open up and let go of it, and let go to instead of having the traditional ERP system where you need to make sure your IT team, make sure you're up to date security, you let go of it and let a third party cloud platform company handle that. So really.
Thanks a lot, Mark. So we talked about security, but when I read through the questions we see coming in the chat, I see another type of question which may be driving a bit of a wedge between our end user panelist and our supplier panelist, which is the question of cost, which comes in two flavors here. We have a question first around, do we truly need 5G, or many of those use cases can work on other technologies, and maybe that is a better choice from a cost point of view. And the second is more around maybe for the suppliers around how can we monetize our 5G services, and should we consider outcome-based models, subscription models, or more traditional models around consumptions and SLAs potentially. So the question of cost seems to be quite prominent on both types of players. Maybe Stephen, starting with you from the end user side, how are you thinking about the cost that comes with delivering those use cases, and especially as it comes to connectivity, and how do you think the different options that are 5G, LoRa, 4G, or even Wi-Fi or fiber?
Just talking generally, I think obviously 5G offers us a number of business benefits, and I think it's trying to understand where you are with your use cases, and also where your factories as well. So if you're looking at legacy factories, you're going to have infrastructure that's already there for those machines and enterprise connectivity, for instance, outside of the building. And you need to really understand kind of like what's the benefits are in terms of payback and business improvement over not upgrading or waiting for a couple of years, for instance, in terms of when you make that move. And clearly, as you say, there's Wi-Fi, there's Wi-Fi 6, there's obviously fiber type structures as well. So I think there's a number of combinations really. It's like what's the business benefits overall, and also where you are with your architecture. Clearly, if you're an opportunity looking at a brand new facility, then there's an opportunity to look at the latest technologies, isn't there, to adopt. Typically infrastructures in factories aren't typically changed every 5 years or so. That they're maintained over a longer product life cycle. And I think some end users might be reluctant to dive straight into 5G, perhaps because the technology obsolescence typically associated with telecoms. You know, if we've really got to look at kind of the consumer world, where it's a very fast-moving industry, is typically a bit more slower in terms of refreshing and having a longer product life cycle. So I think there's a combination of the overall business benefits that you're looking at, the status of your infrastructure, and what projects you're doing. So if you're looking at more automated, or it's like Anthony was mentioned, autonomous vehicles, then that obviously adds another layer of connectivity requirements, data transmission, and also security as well, doesn't it? So it's kind of it's a complicated thing, really. As somebody said, getting 5G as an enabler. Industry 4 is all about cyber physical systems, the connectivity and data transfer, insights, and real-time systems, and it's trying to understand, across that sort of mix of needs, where at any point in time where you would kind of want to adopt 5G. And I think, larger companies might adopt, and more complicated applications might adopt private 5G in the initial years due to maybe local bandwidth restrictions in what's being rolled out from a public infrastructure perspective. Infrastructure as well, because of possibly liability and latency. So if you've got your private network for high real-time systems, then obviously you're taking control of your own infrastructure effectively, as opposed to maybe utilizing maybe a public infrastructure, for instance.
Thank you very much, Stephen. So Saj, building on what we were discussing just before, so it's not just about thinking through what are your technology options and how they match with where your factory currently is, and it's also potentially thinking about business models that you're having with your partners. And I would love to get your point of view on, do you see that changing as Industry 4.0 use cases are being applied? So we were talking about, for instance, about outcome-based business models. Is that something that you see happening right now, or are we staying mostly on fairly traditional business models between, for instance, a manufacturer and their connectivity provider, or their edge and compute services provider?
Yeah, I think that is happening irrespective of 5G. So if you look at especially scenarios where there is a high level of initial investment, particularly when you're talking about private 5G networks, right? There's an initial investment that's fairly high. And when the TCO is not yet proven, you have to look at some kind of a model where there is some outcome. Otherwise, there's no point in investing in that kind of a private 5G network. So I'm pretty sure as we get into this 5G space more and more, there would be these new business models, particularly from the telcos. So the partnership that we have with some of the telcos, the work we're doing in Taiwan, for instance, with Delta and Far East is primarily around that, trying to set up this and then trying to see a few use cases and test out the outcomes from that. And I think we'll get to a point when 5G becomes more mature, then it becomes broad scale, and then the cost starts dropping.
All right, thank you very much, Saj. All right, we have talked a lot about private networks, and I think that they are the natural playground for a lot of the use cases that we have discussed, right? They for large corporate that are operating in a physically well-defined environment, either a factory or port. Building your own network and having very high degree of control over that network is clearly a logical thing to do. I would like to get the view from this panel on how are we thinking about the next stage of development? Like, how do this option of private network may not be something that is viable for smaller players like SMEs. So do we think it will take a long time for SMEs to get some of the benefits from Industry 4.0 and 5G, or are there other options that they can consider, and what will it take to get them on board? Maybe Ganesh, would be great to have your point of view on that.
Sure. I would say that 5G is going to kind of mark the return of the telcos. This is going to be a great revenue earner for the telcos, because telcos are now setting up B2B, business to business segments for providing 5G security and technologies to the end user markets. So for those companies, for those SMEs who cannot afford to have their own private 5G network, telcos are going to be deploying the 5G networks over a public cloud or a hybrid cloud or a private cloud that they can set up for that specific company, whether it's going to be an SME or SMB, or it could be a medium corporate. So these kind of networks will have all the capabilities and capacities of the telco, including the cloudification, the network slicing, the security aspect of it, the scaling. So all features that a typical telco would bring on to their end users. So the B2B segment of the telco is going to be something that the SME should look for. I would agree with you. It's going to take some time. Yeah, so the early movers will be the big corporates all the time who can afford the 5G, the private 5G. But 5G is built for the mid-income as well as the SME sector, where they can enjoy the benefits of digital transformation that is happening. The only difference here is that the network transformation will be with the telco, the digital transformation and the outcome will be with the SME. So this is a space to look out for. There's a lot of white spaces here for the telcos to go and then provide this value-added services to the business segment. And this is going to be the way that the telco is going to grow in the next few years.
All right, thank you very much, Ganesh. There are a lot of very interesting questions in the chat, and I'm not sure we will have time to cover them all. Maybe one for you, Saj. Someone is asking, what are the merits and implications of running applications at the network edge? And should it be built to be 5G specific? I think I couldn't think of a better person and company to ask that to than Microsoft.
I was looking at that question and thinking how to answer that, and you got me. So the business case, I think, should be independent of the connectivity. I think if you're looking at specific business cases around the edge, you should look at that in isolation, then look at what are the possible connection options, whether it's traditional Wi-Fi or 5G. So that is the first step. And as Sean said as well, let's make sure there's a validation for it. But what we are seeing more and more of in terms of current use cases, especially people talking about Industry 4.0, right, moving beyond just automation, is the explosion of sensors in the shop floor, moving beyond the traditional connectivity. Number two is we're seeing more and more use of optical inspection, which again results in high volume data, not just for collecting the images, but actually doing the analysis of the images in real time in a high volume production line. So these are things that were not done before. I think these are some of the use cases that we should look at. And from a Microsoft perspective, we're also seeing an explosion in the use of HoloLens across many manufacturing sites, particularly with COVID. We're seeing more and more deployment of mixed reality because the experts are not able to come down to the specific factory location. So AR, MR is actually providing a lot of benefit through that. And that again requires edge connectivity, high volume, and lends itself to a nice 5G use case. I think these are the scenarios that you got to look at, and then look at the value of 5G to that. Hope that answers Olivier. I'm not sure.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Saj. I think time is running fast, but I think we may have time for one or two more questions from the attendees. I think the cost topic is coming back a few times in the chat, and I would like to revisit that. So, for instance, Emily is asking us, how much does it cost to prepare 5G in the enterprise 5G in an enterprise context? I'm sure the answer is very different depending on different factories, different conditions, different starting points. But maybe Anthony, Stephen, Mark, it would be great to have a sense from you on what is the sort of payback time that you're thinking about when you're looking at 5G use cases and implementation of 5G use cases. or how do you think about the investment required? Can you help some of our attendees gauge what is required, how that may compare with other investments that you would do on modernizing a factory, for instance?
I not have precise figures, as you said, but if I look at some use cases that we have today, we have clearly one where we are experimenting. Yeah, I'll be clear. The agile production line that we are building, which is reconfigurable, it's really a strategic decision to, let's say, build these capabilities, because then it will benefit our 200 factories. So this one, honestly, we are doing one that can benefit 200. So that's the kind of investment that we do. Now, on the other side, over the last 3-4 years, for instance, we have upgraded a lot of Wi-Fi network in distribution centers, in factories. And this is, as you said, I think it's Steven who said that every 5-6 years, you have to upgrade your infrastructure. And by the way, internally in Schneider, the new VP of infrastructure is becoming my best friend because we are working more and more together. It used to be the VP of cybersecurity. Now it's the VP of infrastructure. You see, that's super important. Now the one use cases, for instance, that we are doing that will be powered by 5G will be profitable by itself because we will be able to saturate the utilization of the investment. So we are very pragmatic on that. Now, obviously, the way we work is that we will categorize our sites and have a look where it will make sense to deploy because we will be able to saturate the utilization. So the first site when we've done a deployment of 5G with a telco in France, we built the first one, but with the idea to have 4 different use cases on the same investment. And so we are in the phase now to implement the second and third use case. And that's the idea. It's to, within the time frame of 1.5 years, 2 years, to saturate with different use cases. So one is machine to machine, another one is remote expertise. And I think we have also one on analytics. And that's the idea. So probably you need to look back at your site and identify how you will be able to saturate the utilization of 5G with different use cases. And internally, there will be sites where we have a decision on no-go on 5G, that's for sure. And others where probably in the next 2-3 years, we know that in these top 20, 30 sites, we will be able to, let's say, maximize the value of this one. So I don't have a figure yet, because that's the kind of thing we are working on now, learning. And our partners also are making a lot of optimization on the best way to deploy it. So that's the kind of thing probably you can rework on it every 3 months and have already an optimization now.
Thank you very much, Anthony. We're getting to the end of our session, so thank you very much for the insights that you've brought from such a varied range of perspective. Just as a way to wrap up, can I ask each one of you to share maybe in 1 minute what is your key learning or key takeaway from your experiences so far in 5G for manufacturing, and what would you like the attendees to take away, leave this session with? Maybe starting with you, Steven.
Yeah, I think you've really got to understand your requirements from a cross-functional requirements perspective. And I mean, when you're looking at new technologies, I think so we said it's not about technology's sake. You should set up like a cross-functional sort of interest group internally from business leaders and technology functions within a company to understand their individual use cases, because then you can have a collaborative view of kind of use cases and also investment opportunities as well in terms of route to market. You know, so one person's case study could pay for another one's, for instance, or others, should I say. And I think it's understanding the requirements from that system in terms of performance. You know, certainly for a regulatory sector, it would go down at a private 5G network perspective. And it's also understanding kind of the demographic of any given sort of factory, because wireless communications is in a factory. Factories are generally dynamic pieces of real estate in terms of things are moving around. There's sometimes EMC noise, for instance, coming from various sources in the building. This can all affect performance. So it's kind of understanding that physical and cyber requirements and opportunities, really, to ensure a successful outcome.
Thanks a lot, Steven. Saj?
Yeah, Olivia, I think I'd like to echo what Stephen said. So I think the two types of use cases. Number one is where you have challenges like mining remote locations. These are obvious use cases because they've been struggling to connect, right? So those would be an immediate fit. The second type of area that you need to look at, what are the edge analytics areas where you're currently struggling with, or if you have a lot of AGVs, you're trying to deploy AGVs, then obviously that is an area, or you're looking at more of AR, MR kind of use cases. I think this is where you need to start looking at 5G. That's what I would summarize.
Right. Thank you, Saj. Mark, any parting thoughts?
I'll add to Stephen and Saj and everybody. So it's just enhanced customer experience. You look at the ships now waiting to berth at LA terminals. They're stuck outside, not enough productivity. So you can increase the productivity. If you look at from the industrial production perspective, you can get your components faster and enhance customer experience. I'll stop there. I think I can say so many things. So by being more efficient, really, 24 hours, nobody complain. There's not enough truck drivers around. Autonomous can replace that. It's not replace workforce. It's just not enough around. So.
Thank you very much, Mark. Ganesh?
Okay, I would leave 4 takeaways from this. Number one, when you develop a use case, develop a security use case along with that. And then the second thing is you should know your environment better. So you should know what are the security threats that are looming on your specific environment. So that gives you a great learning on how do you protect your environment. The third thing is have a security framework for 5G, work on a security framework. My final ask is, I don't think security is an overhead. It's going to be an enabler. That's it.
All right. And Anthony, we started with you. Let's close with you as well. Any parting thoughts, recommendation?
Yeah, like Mark, I like to think about what we can do for our customers. And we are looking currently at bringing our customers digitally in our site so that they can really continue to collaborate with us. And we had very good experience, but we need to do more, and 5G will enable that. And second thing also, it's that's a pure domain for co-innovation. It's difficult to do it on your own, as you understood during the discussion. So build around you also a small ecosystem, maybe of solution provider, telco, and someone which will come and which an application on robotic, AR, and so on, and co-innovate together to optimize. So don't believe upfront that this will be difficult. People are here also to work together and improve the deployment of such technology so that you can accelerate also your adoption. That will be my final takeaway.
Thank you so much, Anthony, and thank you, everyone. I think that was a great discussion and fascinating insights into what the journey has been so far. And I'm really looking forward to see how your companies are continuing to push those topics and adoption of Industry 4.0 and as 5G becomes more and more commonplace. Thank you, everyone. And with that, let me hand back to Jane to wrap up.
Thank you so much, everyone. And I'm afraid we've come up to time. So everyone, audience, please join me in thanking our speakers again. We do hope we found today's session enlightening. Please let us know if you wish to reach out to any of the speakers, and also watch out for our next episode in May, when we will be tackling the topic of Industry 4.0 in process manufacturing. Thank you all again for your time today, for joining us, and we hope to see you at the future episodes. Goodbye.